Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Midnight Murmurs, where dreams melt into shadows and stories float through your sleep. Videos to fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying tonight's tale, The House That Waited. Let's begin. The letter with no stamp. I was never meant to return to Black Hollow. That small gray town with its wilted trees and cracked sidewalks had been left behind in a chapter of my life I didn't revisit. My childhood, marked by a series of events too strange to share without inviting disbelief, was buried there, along with the house that waited. But last Tuesday, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address, just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in over 20 years. Delicate, slanted, and inked in a fading blue. Come back. It's time. 3 words on a piece of parchment that smelled faintly of mold and wood smoke. I shouldn't have packed a bag. I shouldn't have booked a ticket. But when something waits for you for decades, it begins to pull. Black Hollow hadn't changed much. The train station was still half abandoned, the sign swaying with the same broken hinge. Fog rolled along the gravel like it was alive, slithering past my ankles as I stepped out. The cab I called didn't ask questions, just nodded when I gave the address. 74 Gallimere Lane, the house that waited. It stood where it always had, its face aged with moss and its windows blind with dust. The front gate creaked open on its own, a gesture more intimate than I'd expected, as if it remembered me. But something was off. The house was supposed to be empty, abandoned. I'd read online that it had been boarded up years ago, but the boards were gone, and the porch light flickered faintly, as if breath filled it. When I reached the door, I didn't knock. I just walked in. The air was thick, not dusty, dense like the silence had been fermenting for years. The floorboards didn't groan under my weight. They whispered, low murmurs like voices trapped beneath the wood. I paused in the hallway, and that's when I saw it, a photo on the wall, perfectly framed. I was in it, smiling, standing in the house's living room. The problem? That photo had never been taken, and I wasn't alone in it. The stranger in the frame. The moment I saw the photograph, something inside me curled, like a muscle remembering pain long forgotten. I stepped closer. The living room in the picture was the same one just ahead of me, through the archway. Same peeling wallpaper, same crooked chandelier hanging like a noose made of crystal. And there I was, a younger me, maybe 8 or 9, standing near the fireplace with the same uneasy smile I never liked in childhood photos. But what chilled me wasn't just that the picture never existed in my memory. It was the man standing behind me, tall, thin, face obscured by blur, like a smudge on the lens or a refusal from the film itself to capture him clearly. But there was a hand on my shoulder in the picture. His hand, pale, too long, fingers that curved just slightly too much, like he wasn't made for this world. I turned away from the photo and looked into the real living room, empty, silent, waiting. A thick, rotten cold spread through the floor, up my legs like the house exhaled through the wood. I should have left, but you don't leave something that's been patient, not when you've been summoned. I walked in. The fireplace was clean. That was the first wrong thing. Nobody lived here, and yet the hearth was swept, the mantel dusted. A candle sat on it, unlit but new, wax pure white like bone. On the coffee table, an old recorder, cassette type, Something you'd see in a detective's evidence room. I press play. Nothing. Then, static. Long, crackling, like a storm held in a box. Then a voice. Not mine. Not my parents. Not anyone I remembered. Software. Calm. Measured. You've come back too late. Silence. The house remembers, but it's not sure it forgives. A high-pitched whine suddenly rose in the audio, like metal screaming underwater, and the tape snapped inside the machine. I stepped back. My breath had begun fogging in front of me. Then I noticed something in the mirror above the fireplace. A smudge. A shadow. But not mine. I was standing still. It moved. The figure. Tall. Blurred. Just like the man in the photo. Watching me from inside the mirror. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body had frozen, but not from fear. From recognition. Because somewhere deep inside me, past memory, past logic, I knew him. He had watched me sleep in this house years ago. He had whispered through the walls, clicked his nails under the floorboards, moved my toys in the night. He was never a ghost. He was something else, and he had never left. The room with no door. I turned away from the mirror. The figure was gone, but the cold remained, not just in the air, but in the walls, in the weight of the house itself. It clung to me like a memory I couldn't shake off, the kind that doesn't fade. It waits, like everything else here. I walked back into the hallway, unsure why my legs were still moving. Some instinct told me to run, but another part, the deeper, older part, whispered, "You owe the house something." The hallway had stretched. I swear it. I remembered the floorboards, how they used to end near the kitchen. But now the corridor extended, impossibly long, vanishing into shadows that no light touched. I followed. There were doors on either side now, ones that didn't belong in the original layout. The handles were old brass, stained green, like veins under skin. I passed the first few without touching them. Something told me they weren't mine to open. Not yet. Then came the one I recognized, the door to my childhood bedroom. It looked untouched. Even the little sticker on it, a faded crescent moon, was still there. My hand hovered near the knob, and for a moment I thought I heard breathing from the other side. Slow, steady, not human. I opened it anyway. The room was exactly as I'd left it, toys scattered on the shelf, the bed with its old blue sheets, the poster on the wall, a night sky with constellations half peeled from age. But none of that chilled me. What did was the clock. It was ticking, not fast, not loud, but it was the same clock I'd smashed before we left. I remembered it clearly. I had thrown it against the wall after a nightmare, and my mother had never replaced it. Yet here it was, ticking gently, as if time had never moved outside these four walls. I walked to the closet. Something scratched from inside. 3 slow scrapes. I opened it. Empty. No clothes. No shelves. Just a wall, except there was something drawn on it, with chalk, childlike. A door. A door with no knob, no hinges, just the outline of one. And written beneath it, "Where the house hides the ones it keeps." I touched the drawing. Cold. Damp. Then the air shifted. Behind me, the closet door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. Total. Complete. I turned, but there was no door anymore. No crack of light, no handle. Just 4 walls. And then I heard it. The breathing. Not from in front of me, behind the chalk door. The breathing wall. The breathing behind the chalk door wasn't loud. That made it worse. It was shallow, wet, like lungs filling with something thicker than air. Like whatever was behind that wall wasn't supposed to be alive, but refused to stop trying. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. Inhale, pause, exhale, rhythmic, patient, as if it knew I was listening. I stepped back. The closet shouldn't have sealed shut behind me. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a mechanism. The house wasn't showing me memories. It was leading me somewhere, feeding me moments it knew I wouldn't run from. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Dead. No signal, no battery, not even the option to turn it on. Then something new. A sound. Not breathing this time. Scratching. From inside the wall. A slow drag of fingernails on wood. Then a voice muffled, distorted like it came from beneath the house. Open the door, and we can both leave. I stepped forward, heart hammering. It was a lie. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. I took the chalk from the floor, a stub I hadn't seen earlier, and began retracing the lines of the door on the wall. As I redrew them, something inside the wall began to move. I heard bones pop, tendons stretch. It was getting closer. Then, the final piece, the doorknob. I drew it, and the wall breathed in, deeply. The chalk door began to open, not by hinge, not like a door, but like skin tearing apart to reveal what lay beneath. And behind it wasn't a room. It was a corridor, long, endless. The walls made of brick, damp with age. A yellow light flickered from somewhere deep within, like a lantern swinging slowly in forgotten air. I stepped through. As soon as I did, the opening behind me sealed shut. No sound, no trace, just brick. The hallway stretched on, and the further I walked, the more I noticed the bricks were marked. Scratches, symbols, names, and then I found one. My name, etched into the wall with something sharp, fresh, still bleeding around the edges. That's when I realized this corridor wasn't beneath the house. It was inside it, a part of its body, a spine of hallways that only existed when the house was awake. And the house was very much awake. The things that lived between the bricks. The corridor felt tighter with every step. The air was wet, not just humid, but soaked with something unseen. The walls dripped, not water, something thicker. I didn't touch it. The light that had flickered far ahead was gone now. I hadn't heard it go out. It had just blinked from existence, like the house had changed its mind. I walked slowly. My footsteps didn't echo. They were absorbed, as if the floor swallowed the sound. Then I heard it. Not the breathing, not the scratching. This was whispering, dozens of voices, close to my ears, beneath my feet, inside the walls, all at once, none clear, like a language older than anything I'd heard, but still recognizable in some dark part of me. I turned a corner I hadn't seen coming. There were doors now, 5 on each side, all identical, rotted wood, rusted handles, but each had something carved above it. Names. Some were first names, some were just numbers, and one, the third on the left, had only a single word: Mother. The handle was warm, too warm. I moved past it. Then the 4th door creaked open, slowly without a touch. I didn't want to look, but I did. Inside was a room with no ceiling, just black sky, not night sky, void, like the universe forgot this corner existed. And in the middle of the room stood a chair. Someone sat in it, still, head down, hands folded. I couldn't move, not because I was afraid. I'd passed that threshold hours ago, but because something was pulling at me, gently like a mother waking a child. The figure in the chair raised its head, and it was me, paler, thinner, hollow, eyes like dry wells. It opened its mouth and whispered, "You were always going to come back. You were born here, even if you weren't born yet." Then the figure stood, but I didn't see it move. One blink, it was sitting. Next blink, it was standing. The door slammed shut. I stumbled back, heart thundering, and that's when I realized every door was watching me. Not the rooms, the doors themselves. Their knots, their cracks, their grooves, shaped like eyes, twitching, adjusting, like the house was deciding which version of me to keep, which version to feed to the thing behind the wall. I ran, down the corridor, past the doors, past the names, until I saw it. A light, not yellow, not warm, white, cold, sterile, and in front of it, a metal door, different, out of place, clean, sealed tight. On it, etched deep into steel, "The room that remembers." And below that, scratched more violently, "Do not open unless you are ready to be known." The room that remembers. I stood before the metal door longer than I realized. My breath misted in front of me, each exhale a fragile thread in a frozen air. The corridor behind me had gone quiet, too quiet. Even the whispers were gone, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would choose. I reached for the handle. It was cold enough to burn. The door didn't creak, didn't groan. It opened clean, like it had been oiled for this moment, like it wanted to be opened, but only by me. Inside, a room of mirrors, hundreds of them, tall, cracked, fogged, rimmed in gold or iron or nothing at all. No walls, just reflections. Floor to ceiling, mirrors all around. Some leaned crookedly, some hung midair, and every single one held a version of me, older, younger, smiling, screaming, bleeding, disappearing. 1,000 timelines folded into silver glass. I stepped inside. The door shut softly behind me. No lock, no sound. But I knew I wasn't getting out until the room allowed it. I moved between the mirrors. Some didn't reflect me at all. They showed the house, but in different states, burning, flooded, overgrown with trees, and always, always the tall figure in the background, watching, waiting. In one mirror, I was asleep. In another, I was buried beneath the floorboards. In a third, I was opening the same door I had just walked through. But what waited on the other side was not this room. I reached toward one, my hand trembling. My fingers met the glass, and it gave way, like water. I stepped through. Suddenly, I was back in the house, but it was daytime. Dust filtered through the sunlight like golden snow, the smell of bread baking. And then I heard it, my mother's voice, software, humming. I turned a corner and saw her. She was standing in the kitchen, young, younger than I remembered, stirring something on the stove. Then she looked up, right at me, but her eyes were hollow, not black, not empty, just wrong. And her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. "You left us in here. You left us to rot inside the house." Then her skin began to crack, not bleed, crack, like paint peeling off a portrait. I stumbled back, through another mirror, back in the mirror room, panting, shaking. Only now one of the mirrors was broken, not cracked, shattered, and behind the shards, something moved. The tall figure. No longer blurry. Its face wasn't human. It was made of faces. Mine, my mother's, the boy from the photograph, all stitched and shifting like a curtain in the wind. It pressed its many fingers against the glass and said in my voice, "You are the memory. The house is the truth." Then the lights went out, where the forgotten go darkness. Total, not the kind where your eyes adjust. This was different, thick, alive, like ink suspended in silence. After the lights went out in the room that remembers, I stood still, breathing shallow, listening. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, wet, not shoes, bare feet, skin against damp stone, not mine, getting closer. I backed into a corner I couldn't see, hand brushing something soft, hair, a handful of it. I jerked away and something giggled, software, childlike, from the floor. Then a match struck, on its own, somewhere in the black. A face flared into view in the flickering glow. It was a girl, no older than 10, pale, her eyes too wide, pupils thin like needles. She was holding a box of matches, smiling with cracked lips. Skin around her mouth torn from smiling too hard, for too long. "You're late," she whispered, "but it still remembers you." Before I could speak, she blew out the match. Darkness again. The room shifted. I could feel it, like being moved inside a body that was breathing around me. The floor pulsed. The air had veins. Something about the mirrors was gone now. Not just broken. They had melted, puddled across the stone like quicksilver. Then a door appeared. Not a real door, more like an absence of wall. A doorway made of shadow, a space where reality refused to form. The girl was gone. Her giggle echoed once more, then nothing. I stepped through. This new corridor was narrow. Red light pulsed from the ceiling, like a heartbeat. And along the walls in uneven rows were names, carved deeply, some familiar, my childhood friends, a neighbor, even my father, and under them, short inscriptions. Left before the house could finish, saw too much, tried to burn the truth, then one line under no name, still inside, still dreaming. I walked deeper. Then, the hum started, low at first, like a fridge or a distant plane, but it grew, layered, voices hidden in the frequency. Then I turned a corner and found the nest. That's the only word for it. A massive room, walls lined with web-like strands of hair, teeth, and thread. Suspended in the center, bodies, some curled, some twitching, all asleep. Each one hooked to the walls by thin black strings running into their mouths, ears, and eyes. And in the middle of them all, a throne made of mirrors, and on it, the tall figure. But it wasn't tall anymore. It was becoming me, my skin, my shape, my voice. Every second, it shifted closer, like it was remembering how to be me. I stepped forward, and all the sleeping bodies exhaled at once, a deep, shuddering breath that shook the walls. The figure spoke. "You've forgotten what you left behind. The house did not." It held out its hand, and in its palm, my old house key, the one from when I was a child. And then it whispered, "You're not here to escape. You're here to return." The return key. The key was warm, not just to the touch. It throbbed, like it had a pulse, like it was alive, waiting for a lock I hadn't seen yet. I didn't want to take it, but my hand moved anyway. As my fingers brushed the metal, the house sighed, all around me, through the floors, through the walls, as if something ancient had finally been satisfied. The sleeping bodies stirred. One whimpered. One began to smile without waking. The figure on the mirror throne leaned in. "You locked the truth away. Now it's time to open it." I turned the key over in my hand. It looked normal. Brass, worn, just like the one I used to wear on a chain around my neck when I was 7. The one I lost the day my mother disappeared. The figure saw the thought pass through my face. It smiled, with my smile. "You never lost it. You buried it." I stepped back, but the floor was gone. Not broken, just gone, like it had never been there. I fell soundless into darkness. When I landed, it was on carpet, my old bedroom, exactly how it looked when I was a kid. The glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the dinosaur lamp, even the poster on the wall, the one I tore down after the funeral. All of it was here, untouched by time. But something was wrong. The door was sealed, with black tape, layers of it stuck across like stitches, and on each strip of tape, written in chalk, "Do not remember, do not open, do not return." I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, shuffling, dragging something, then a whisper through the door. "You left me in the walls." I backed toward the closet. It was cracked open. Something inside was breathing, not heavy, not loud. A child's breath. I opened it. Nothing. Just toys, dust, and a photograph. It had no faces, just outlines where people should have been. A blurred family standing in front of a house with no windows, just blackness where the eyes should be. Then the photo shifted, like a ripple through memory. The figures appeared, one by one. My father, my mother, and then me, smiling. But my eyes were wrong, and behind us, barely visible, the tall figure, closer than I remembered, its hand on my shoulder. The photograph burst into flame in my hand. No pain, just heat. And the walls of the room began to bleed, dark, viscous liquid dripping from the corners of the ceiling. The tape on the door peeled away slowly, curling like burned leaves. And behind it, not a hallway, a hall of doors, each one marked with a word. If, before, still, after, now. And the last door, the only one without a handle, said, home. The key burned in my palm. It was time to choose. The door that should not be opened. I stood before the door, the one marked home. It was different from the others. The wood was worn, but not decayed. The edges were smooth, untouched by time, like it was always meant to be here, waiting. The door didn't have a handle, just a deep indentation, like something wanted to press in. The key in my hand had stopped burning. It was cool now, still alive, still pulsing with a quiet rhythm. The moment my fingers closed around it again, I felt something shift. The house held its breath, waiting, listening. And then, in the silence, I realized I was no longer alone. The footsteps, that sound of dragging, it was closer now. I turned. The figure stood in the doorway. It was different now, more than just the face of me. Its features melded with mine, my childhood, my mother, my father. But there was something wrong about its mouth. Too wide, too many teeth, something inhuman hidden beneath the skin. Its eyes, though, they were mine, my eyes, and it smiled, pulling its lips too far back to be natural. The eyes blinked, but they didn't blink together. It tilted its head. You came back, but you can never leave. The figure reached out, fingers stretching impossibly long. I stepped backward, but my feet didn't touch the ground. The carpet, the whole room, wasn't real. It was shifting beneath me like quicksand. The figure's voice grew hollow. You locked us here, all of us, in every door, in every room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my feet were frozen to the floor. I was trapped, just like I had been as a child. And then I understood. This wasn't my room. This was the house. I was standing inside it, not just in the physical sense. I was part of it, a piece of its design, the foundation, the memory. The door behind me rattled. Something was pushing against it from the other side. I could hear my mother's voice again, faintly, distant. You left us behind. The figure stepped closer. Its fingers brushed my cheek, cold. I didn't feel it at first, but then the cold spread through me like fire. It was trying to take me, absorb me. Its hands were inside me now, shifting through my thoughts, my memories, untangling me from every corner of this place. I couldn't remember where I began and where the house ended. The figure whispered, its voice inside me. You were always going to return. You never left. You were always waiting for me. I slammed the key into the indentation. The door screamed. Not metal, not wood, flesh. The door opened. I stepped through, but it wasn't the room I expected. It wasn't the house. It was nothing, just pure black. Nothing to stand on, nothing to hold. But I could still hear the figure, still feel its breath on my neck, till see it in my reflection, 1,000 versions of it, blending with my own. You can't escape this. You are here. You are part of it. And then, nothing. The nothingness was thick. It pressed against me from all sides, like I was sinking into it. My hands trembled. My heart thundered in my chest, but the air, it was completely still. No wind, no sound, not even my own breath. I reached out and touched nothing, but I could feel it. I could feel the edges of something. Something that was not here, but still had to be. The figure whispered again, but not with words. It was a pulse, a thought woven directly into my mind. You cannot leave. I tried to move, but the ground, or the lack of it, held me still. Then I saw it, in the black, a glimmer, faint, almost like a reflection. A place where light still existed. It flickered, once, twice, and then it shaped itself into a door. The same one, the one with no handle. It wasn't the house. It wasn't anything I recognized. It was the truth, and standing before it, the figure, but not the one with my face. This one was the house itself. It was pure darkness and reflection, all woven into a single form. Its eyes were every door, every room, every hallway, every memory that had ever existed. Its voice, not words, but a knowing. You've always been here. You always were. I reached for the door. This time my hand didn't tremble. The key was still there, in my palm, pulsing. I turned it. The door clicked open. I stepped through. It wasn't a room. It wasn't a house. It was the end. The nothingness disappeared. The ground beneath my feet solidified. The air was thick with the scent of dust, but it was fresh, clean. And in front of me the house stood, not the twisted, decaying version. This was the house before. It was pristine, untouched, beautiful. And standing at the door was my mother. She was alive. She was real. She smiled at me. The same smile I remembered from childhood, and I felt it. The warmth, the pull, the longing to go back, to be home. But I knew this wasn't my home anymore. It was just a shadow, a memory of the truth. And as I looked at her, I saw it, the figure standing behind her, in the reflection of the door. Not my mother, not even a part of her. Just the house waiting, watching. Its mouth opened in a grin, and I heard the echo of its voice. You can never leave. You are always going to come back. I turned away. I left, and the house waited. The forgotten stairs. The door had closed behind me, but the silence was overwhelming. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was oppressive. Every inch of the room pressed in, as if the walls themselves were alive, watching, waiting for the right moment to devour me again. The house had changed, or maybe it was me who had changed. I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that I was no longer in control. I was no longer just a visitor here. I was part of it. And as much as I wanted to run, something inside me refused to move. The key in my hand still pulsed, cool against my skin. I didn't dare let go of it. Not yet, not with the house watching. I turned around, and there it was, a stairwell I hadn't seen before. It wasn't there when I first entered. I was sure of it. The walls around it were smooth, undisturbed. But now a set of steps appeared, hidden in plain sight, as if the house itself had simply forgotten to show them to me. The air around the stairs was thick, and the faint scent of something decaying lingered. The walls seemed to close in tighter, and the temperature dropped, not enough to freeze, but enough to make my breath come out in thin, misted clouds. Something was calling me. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't sound. It was more like a pressure, a tug at my very soul, pulling me upward, as if the house was offering me a path. But a path to where? What lay at the top? And then the whispers began, low at first, barely audible, like the soft rustle of old paper. But then they grew louder, clearer. Come up. Come find what you left behind. The stairs creaked as I took the first step. Each footfall felt like a tiny scream in the silence, reverberating through the air, bouncing off the walls. The temperature dropped even further, the cold sinking into my bones. It was getting harder to breathe. I could feel it now, the presence. It was waiting at the top. But what was it? The stairwell was long, twisting unnaturally. Each step led me farther into the dark, deeper into the house. The wood beneath my feet was damp and cracked, splintering in places, yet the stairs held, like the house was giving me just enough hope to make it to the next step, only to snatch it away at the last possible moment. A flicker of light, faint, coming from somewhere at the top. I couldn't make out the source. It was like the light was alive. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeats. Another whisper. It knows you. It remembers you. I stopped, frozen on the step. The light flickered again, more urgently this time, and then the cold air around me began to shift. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was alive. It wrapped around me, moving like tendrils, brushing my skin with an intimacy that felt unnatural. And then I saw it. At the top of the stairs, just barely visible, was a figure, a silhouette. It was tall, much taller than me, and its shape was familiar. Too familiar. It wore my face, my features, but the skin was cracked, gray, like old porcelain, chipped and stained. Its eyes, empty, hollow. But still, I knew it was me. I tried to move back, but the stairwell had changed. The walls were closer now, pressing in on me. There was no room to turn around. The stairs stretched up impossibly high. I had to keep going. Step after step, my body refused to obey. It felt like I was being pulled up against my will, forced toward the thing at the top. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching me with its empty, broken eyes. The whispers turned into laughter, cold, high-pitched, a child's laugh. But it wasn't a child. It was the house, laughing at me. As I reached the top, I couldn't help myself. I reached for the figure, but as my hand brushed the air, it disappeared, not fading. Number. It was swallowed by the walls, consumed by the house, like it had never been there. And in its place stood a door, another door. This one, like all the others, had no handle, only a deep, swirling darkness behind it. The key pulsed again, and the whispers began again, louder this time. You left it here. You're still here. You can never leave. The echoes of what was the door stood before me, as dark as the shadows surrounding it. I knew it. I could feel it. There was something behind that door. Something I wasn't ready to face, but I had no choice. The house was pressing me forward. The whispers grew louder. clawing at my thoughts, urging me to open it. It's waiting for you. You can't escape what you are. You are part of it now. I reached for the key. My hand trembled, but I forced myself to place it in the lock. The moment the cold metal touched the keyhole, I felt it, a pulse, as though the house itself was reacting to my touch. The walls around me shuddered, as if they too had been waiting for me to make this move. The key turned, slowly, reluctantly. The door creaked open, revealing the darkness beyond. But this wasn't the same darkness I'd felt before. No, this was different. It was deep, endless. There was something living inside that darkness, something that breathed in rhythm with the very heartbeat of the house. I hesitated. For a brief moment, I thought I could turn back. I could run, escape, forget all of this, but the house wouldn't let me. I could feel it in my bones. The house knew me. It knew what I was, and it wasn't going to let me go. I stepped through the door. The air was stale here, thick with the scent of old wood, rotting in places. My footsteps echoed, but it wasn't just my own. There were other sounds, faint, almost inaudible, like whispers from a distance, too soft to make sense of, yet I could still feel them. The house was alive with memories, with stories that had been buried so deep that even I couldn't remember them. And then I saw it, a mirror, an old cracked mirror, standing alone in the middle of the room. The edges were chipped, darkened with age, but it still reflected something. It reflected me. Not just me, though. It reflected the house, the room I was standing in, its decaying walls, the fading light. But it was more than that. The reflection showed shadows moving inside the mirror, flickering at the edges like figures, eyes staring back at me. I couldn't look away. As I stepped closer, the reflection shifted. It was no longer just me. The faces of my parents began to form, their features warped and indistinct. Their eyes were hollow like they were trapped in the glass, begging to be released. "Help us! You left us here!" I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted to the floor. The whispering grew louder, more desperate. "We never left. You never left." The glass shuddered, ripples spreading through it, distorting the reflection. The shadows behind me moved, flickering into something darker, more aggressive. And then I saw it. The tall figure, just behind me in the reflection, standing at the edge of the mirror, waiting. I turned around, but it wasn't there. The mirror began to crack. Long, jagged lines split the glass. Each crack seemed to pulse, as though the house was being torn apart from the inside. The whispers grew frantic. "You can't run! You can't hide! It's here!" Suddenly I heard it, a low growl, deep and guttural. It came from the shadows in the corner of the room. It was as though something was awakening, something ancient and hungry. The very air felt thick with its presence. I backed away, but the shadows moved faster than I could. The room closed in around me, the walls pressing in. The mirror cracked again, the pieces falling to the floor, shattering into shards of glass that glowed faintly. The figure stepped through the mirror. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was real. It towered over me, its form more solid now. Its face, my face, twisted into a grotesque grin, eyes too wide, too black. It stretched its arms toward me, the fingers impossibly long, stretching, reaching for my throat. I screamed, but no sound came out. "You were always part of this house," the figure whispered, its voice a distorted echo of my own. "You were always waiting to return." And then it lunged. The hollow below, I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring into the eyes of the thing that mirrored me. It wasn't me, not truly. It was a mockery of me, something that wore my face and twisted it into something unrecognizable, something hungry. The fingers reached for me, but I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed. It wasn't the house pulling me anymore. It was the thing, the figure, the shadow, the very soul of the house itself. It had my name, my face. It had everything that I had ever been. The fingers brushed my skin, cold, cold like death. It burned, but it was a quiet burn, a slow one that spread like a disease, filling every inch of me. You cannot escape, it whispered, its voice scraping across my mind like nails on glass. I blinked, and for the briefest moment, I saw another door in the reflection, a different one. The figure's grip tightened, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I was tired, tired of running, tired of trying to escape something that had always been here, waiting, waiting for me to remember. I had to open the door, the one I saw in the reflection. I pulled away from the figure, stumbling backward into the room. The shadows closed in behind me, the air growing thick and suffocating, but my eyes were locked on that door, the one behind the thing that wore my face. I knew it was real. I knew it had to be. My legs moved, though they felt like they were made of lead. My body screamed at me to stop, but I didn't listen. I couldn't. I had to reach that door. The figure screeched behind me, its hands clawing at the air. But I was already through the space, stumbling toward the door at the back of the room, the door that should not exist. I reached for it, the old wood smooth under my fingertips. It wasn't like the other doors. It didn't pulse with energy. It wasn't full of shadows. It was calm, still, like it had been waiting for me, like it was meant for me. I turned the knob. The door opened without a sound. The room beyond was empty, a vast, hollow space, nothing but blackness. But it was different from the oppressive dark of the house. This darkness was freedom. It wasn't suffocating. It wasn't cold. It was just open. I stepped through, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. I felt weightless as I crossed into the blackness. There was no sound here, no presence, just the feeling of being suspended in space, alone. But then I saw it. At the far end of the room, a single light flickered on, a small, dim glow. It beckoned to me. I didn't hesitate. I walked toward it. The closer I got to the light, the clearer the room became. The blackness started to dissipate, revealing a staircase. It spiraled downward, disappearing into the depths. Cold air wafted up from below, carrying the scent of something ancient, something forgotten. I paused at the edge of the staircase. It was so familiar. I had seen it before, in my dreams. I didn't need to see where it led. I knew. I had to go down. It was inevitable. The house had been leading me here the whole time. I stepped onto the first stair, and then another. Each step felt heavier than the last. My feet felt like they were sinking into the wood, each step pulling me down, into the unknown. I descended. With every step, I could feel the presence growing again, not behind me, but beneath me. It was waiting down there, somewhere in the dark, in the deep. "You can't leave," the voice whispered, not from the figure, not from the house, but from the depths themselves. You never left. The air grew colder as I descended further. The darkness stretched before me, endless, and the only thing that marked my path was the faint, flickering light. I couldn't see the end, but I could feel it. The weight of the house below me was growing, pulling, trying to swallow me whole. I reached the bottom of the stairs, and there it was, a door, the last one. It stood at the end of a long, dark hallway. The walls were made of stone, the air damp with age. The door was different from all the others. It wasn't wood, but stone, cracked and weathered. It had no keyhole, no handle, only the faintest outline of something etched into the stone, a symbol, a marking, a warning. And in the very center of the door, I saw it, the house, the final chamber. The door loomed before me, as though the very air around it was thickening, becoming heavier, like a pressure that was about to explode. I could feel it deep in my chest, the steady beat of something ancient, alive, waiting just behind the stone. The house had drawn me here, and now it was demanding that I face what had been hidden for so long. I approached the door, my steps slow but certain. The marking on the stone was familiar, too familiar. It was the same symbol I had seen before, in fleeting glimpses, etched into the walls of the rooms I had passed through. It was a crescent moon, wrapped around an eye. But this wasn't just a symbol, it was a seal. The door was an entrance, but it wasn't an ordinary one. It was the threshold to something that had been sealed away, buried beneath layers of time, memories, and stories long forgotten. I reached out, but as my fingers touched the stone, a shock ran through me, sharp and jagged, like the walls themselves were alive, responding to my touch. The mark burned into my skin, searing through the fabric of my soul. I pulled back, gasping for breath, but the pain wasn't physical. It was deeper, resonating in places I couldn't see, places I couldn't escape. The house knew me. It knew what I was, and it was now revealing the final truth. I had to open the door. I pressed my palm flat against the stone, closing my eyes and let the pain flood through me. With each passing second, the pressure grew. The whispers, those soft, insistent murmurs I had heard ever since I entered this place, grew louder. They weren't whispers anymore. They were voices calling to me from the deep. "It's time," they said. "You have always been here. We have always been waiting." The door shifted. The seal broke. I felt the energy vibrate through the air, a powerful hum that seemed to reverberate from the very bones of the house. The door opened. Beyond the stone was a vast chamber, unlike any I had seen before. It stretched on in all directions, a circular room with no walls, only darkness. So deep and so vast that I couldn't see the edges. It felt as though the very universe was contained within this room. There was no light, no air, no sound, just a hollow emptiness. But in the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. Atop it rested a book. The cover was weathered, ancient, bound in a dark material I couldn't identify. It pulsed with a sickly light, like it was alive, the only source of illumination in the room. I took a step toward it. The air around me grew heavier, oppressive. The darkness seemed to shift, following my movements. I could feel the weight of the house pressing in from all sides, as though it was watching, waiting for me to make a choice. I had to touch the book. There was no way around it. The house demanded it. I reached out. My fingers brushed the cover, and the world seemed to freeze. A sharp pain shot through my head, and visions flooded my mind. Images, memories, and feelings, all coming at me at once, too fast, too overwhelming to comprehend. I saw the house in its original form, not the decaying ruin I had walked through, but a grand mansion, alive, full of laughter, warmth, and light. I saw a family, gathered around a fireplace, my family. I saw the faces of my parents, young and full of life, their smiles wide. And there, standing among them, was a child who looked just like me, but I didn't recognize this child. I didn't remember ever being that child. Then the visions changed. I saw the house again, but now it was empty. The light was gone. The warmth had faded. The walls were alive, twisted and distorted, like the house itself had taken on a life of its own. And standing at the center of it all was the figure, the one I had seen before, in the mirror. It was me. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. The house had never let go of me. It had always been waiting, drawing me back, pulling me into the fold, because I was the one it had been waiting for. I was the key, the one who had never really left. I had built the house, I had shaped it, and now I had returned to claim it. The room around me began to shift. The walls began to take form, warping, twisting, folding in on themselves. The pedestal disappeared, replaced by a figure, the same one I had seen in the mirror. It was me, but not me. It was the house. The figure reached out its hand, and I knew then what I had to do. I had to embrace it. The hollow heart. The figure before me, the twisted reflection of my own self, stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. The darkness in the room seemed to shrink around it, suffocating me with its weight, as if the very air I breathed was saturated with the house's ancient hunger. I had seen this figure before. It had watched me in the mirror. It had haunted my every step. But now it wasn't a mere reflection. It was real. The walls around me trembled as though the house itself was alive, watching, waiting for me to accept its final truth. I had built this. I had shaped it. And now, I was part of it. The figure reached out, extending its long, shadowy hand toward me. Its fingers seemed to stretch like twisted roots, curling and cracking as they reached toward me. For a moment I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to turn away, to escape, to run. But deep inside I knew. The house had always known me. And I had always known the house. I stepped forward. The air grew colder and the ground beneath my feet seemed to sink. With each step, the world around me blurred, the edges of reality slipping away like sand through my fingers. As I drew closer, I could hear its voice. It wasn't the whispering I had heard before. No, this voice was different. It was familiar, too familiar. You've always been here. You were never meant to leave. I reached out, my hand trembling as it neared the figure. But the moment our fingers touched, something shifted. The darkness around us contracted, like a heartbeat slowing, and then a sharp crack split the air, followed by a low, ominous hum. The house was reacting. It was waking up. Suddenly the ground beneath me gave way. I fell. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The air was thick with shadows, suffocating me as I plummeted. There was no end, no bottom, only a feeling of free falling into an abyss that seemed to stretch forever. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, I stopped. I landed in a room unlike any I had seen before. The walls were smooth stone, glossy like black glass, reflecting only darkness. The air was still, almost unnervingly quiet. But in the center of the room, illuminated by a pale, flickering light, stood a pedestal. On it rested a mirror. I had always known the house, the same mirror that had tormented me since I entered this place, the one that had shown me my own face, twisted, distorted, hollow. But this time, the mirror was different. This time, it was cracked, and through the cracks, I saw something, a face, not mine, not me. It was a face I had never seen before. It was pale, sickly, The eyes were wide open, black and empty, like the void. But there was something alive in them, something that watched me from behind the cracked surface. It was the same figure, the one I had encountered in the reflection. But this time, it was not just a shadow. This time, it was real. "You've been looking for me," the figure whispered through the cracks, its voice a soft, broken echo. "And now you've found me." I reached for the mirror, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. The moment my hand brushed the glass, the cracks deepened. The mirror began to shudder, vibrating with a low hum that resonated through my bones. And then it shattered. The world around me fractured. The room, the pedestal, the mirror, they all crumbled into dust, leaving me standing in a dark void. The house was gone, but I could still feel it somewhere. The presence, the pull, the connection. And then I understood the truth that had eluded me for so long. I wasn't trapped in the house. I had always been the house. I gasped for air, but no breath came. The void surrounded me, pressing in from all sides. And then something moved. Inside me. It wasn't the house anymore. It was me. I had become it. The house had waited for me to return. It had waited for me to remember. The mirror had shown me the truth. I was its creation. I was its architect, its prisoner, and its master. The darkness had always been me, and now it would never let me go. The heart of darkness. The darkness swirled around me, thick and suffocating, pressing down on every side. I could feel it inside me, beneath my skin, in the very core of my being. It was no longer just the house, it was me. I was the darkness. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since the mirror shattered. Time no longer made sense. Everything had become a blur of shadows, of whispers. But there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. I could never leave. Not anymore. The house had claimed me. It had always been waiting for me to realize the truth, to acknowledge that it wasn't a place, it was a part of me. I took a step forward, my feet moving almost of their own accord, as though the darkness was guiding me. The air around me was charged with an energy I couldn't explain. It was alive, thrumming with a power older than the world itself. I knew I had to go deeper. I had to understand the full extent of the house's power. And to do that, I had to face the heart of it. I found myself standing before a door, one I hadn't seen before. It was different from the others, more ancient. It was not made of wood or stone, but of living shadows swirling and shifting like smoke. The handle was barely visible, but as I reached out, it formed beneath my fingers, cold and smooth. The door opened. Beyond it was a vast, endless chasm. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse, as if the very earth were breathing. A cold wind howled from the depths, carrying with it the scent of decay, of forgotten things, of souls lost to time. I stepped forward, my breath catching in my throat as I descended into the darkness. The deeper I went, the stronger the pull became. The walls of the chasm were not solid, but fluid, shifting like liquid, constantly changing shape. I could hear whispers, faint voices that seemed to echo from the very walls, telling me things I could not comprehend. But the more I listened, the clearer they became. "You've always been here. You were never meant to leave. You belong to us now." The words filled my mind, echoing in every corner of my consciousness. They weren't just whispers, they were memories. My memories. But they weren't the memories I had lived. They were the memories of the house, of the souls it had claimed, of the lives it had consumed. I stumbled, my feet slipping on the shifting ground, but I couldn't stop. The pull was too strong. I had to go deeper. The house was calling me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the center of the chasm. And there, suspended in the middle of the vast emptiness, was a heart. It was not human, but it wasn't anything I had ever seen before. It was a blackened, pulsating mass, beating in rhythm with the energy that filled the air. I could feel its power radiating outward, a force that was both alive and dead, both terrifying and alluring. It was the heart of the house, the source of everything. And I knew then that I had a choice. I could take it. I could claim the heart of the house and become its master, its ruler. I could use its power to shape the world, to bend it to my will. I could control everything. But as I reached out to touch it, a voice, my voice, stopped me. "You are already lost." The words echoed in the void. The house had spoken, not with its usual whispers, but with the voice of me, of my soul. It was a warning, a reminder. I wasn't in control anymore. The house had already claimed me. I hesitated, my fingers hovering just above the dark, beating mass. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. If I touched it, I would be part of it forever. But if I didn't, if I walked away, I would be nothing, a shadow lost in the endless dark. It didn't matter, I realized. There was no escape. There never had been. I reached forward and touched the heart. The moment my fingers made contact, the world exploded. The air around me ignited, the energy crackling and twisting in ways I couldn't understand. The house trembled, its walls shifting violently, as though the very foundation was breaking apart. I felt myself being pulled apart, my body and soul ripped from each other, torn into countless pieces. And then everything stopped. I was standing in a room, but it wasn't a room I recognized. The walls were not made of stone or wood, but of light, soft and golden, warm and inviting. The darkness had faded, the whispers were gone, the house was silent. But as I looked around, I realized something was wrong. The room was empty. There was no door, no windows, no way out. I was alone. And then I realized I had never left. The house had transformed me, changed me into something else, something that no longer needed to escape. I had become the house. The eternal weight. I stood there in the room surrounded by soft golden light, but it felt like a distant illusion, a fleeting dream that was too fragile to hold. The truth was undeniable. I had become the very thing I feared, the very thing I had been running from. The house wasn't just a structure. It wasn't just a building with walls and rooms. It was a force, a living entity that had been waiting for me. And now it had consumed me, wrapped itself around my soul, twisted my very essence into its own. I could feel it coursing through my veins, an unyielding, suffocating presence that would never let me go. I could still hear the whispers, faint but growing louder. They weren't voices from the walls anymore. They were inside me, within my mind, my thoughts. I was the house. The light that surrounded me flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty space. I could feel the weight of time pressing on me, stretching it out, making every second feel like an eternity. The air was thick, charged with the energy I couldn't escape. There was no longer any distance between me and the house. We were one. I walked forward, my steps slow and deliberate, as if the weight of my new existence pressed down on me, dragging me closer to the inevitable. There was nowhere to run, no way to hide from the truth that had consumed me. I had once feared the house, but now I was it. In the distance I saw a door. It was no ordinary door. It was made of shifting shadows, constantly changing, reshaping itself like a living thing. The very air around it seemed to vibrate with a low hum, a familiar energy that resonated deep within me. The house was calling. I approached it, but something inside me hesitated. It was as though a small part of my mind, buried deep beneath the surface, was still trying to fight, trying to remember who I had once been. But it was no use. The house had taken everything from me, my memories, my identity, my very soul. And now it was time to accept it. I reached for the door. As my fingers brushed against the shadowy surface, the door opened. Beyond it was a landscape I could never have imagined. It wasn't the house, but it wasn't the outside world either. It was something else, a place between worlds where time and space had no meaning. The sky was a deep, endless black, with stars that burned brighter than the sun. The ground beneath my feet was smooth and flat, stretching out in all directions without end. In the distance I saw figures, not just one or two, but countless souls, walking in silence. They moved like shadows, empty and lost, their faces indistinct. But I knew who they were. They were the ones who had been here before, the ones the house had claimed. I stepped forward into the endless landscape, and the door closed behind me with a soft, final click. I was alone, but I was not lonely. The house was with me. It had always been with me. I turned, and in the distance I saw the house, or rather, what had been the house. It was no longer a building. It was a monument, a massive, towering structure of blackened stone, its edges sharp and jagged, reaching up toward the sky like a twisted spire. It pulsed with a deep, resonating hum, as though it had become part of the very fabric of the universe itself. And I knew then, as I gazed at the twisted spire in the distance, that the house would never die. It would never fade. It would continue to wait. It would always be waiting for the next soul, for the next person who would come looking for answers, seeking refuge, or simply lost in the dark. And when they entered, they would meet the house, and it would claim them, just as it had claimed me. I had become a part of its eternal cycle, and so I walked into the dark, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The house would wait forever, and I would wait with it. We would be one. The waiting would never end. The house would always be waiting. The end.